Well, hope everyone's having a pleasant evening. We're driving back through Pennsylvania to Michigan, enjoying the last Saturday of July. It's been a beautiful day. We got our 2011 Duramax dually with a 6.6 liter LML series engine. And I want to show you something, because on the way out to Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago, we had something a little bit unusual happen, at least as far as we're concerned. If you see that blue silicone rubber boot there, that connects the outlet of the compressor on the turbo to the charge air pipe, which leads to the intercooler. And that blue boot, during the drive out here, completely separated from the pipe. The pipe basically blew off, and it sounded like a tire blown out. It happened twice, as a matter of fact. The first time we were starting up from a rest stop on the Ohio Turnpike, headed east on Interstate 80, and again, it sounded like a car tire exploding. When this thing accelerates, by the way, it makes a ton of boost, whether you're accelerating on flat ground or uphill. When you're pulling a heavy trailer, as we were loaded up to about 23,000 pounds total. It wasn't that heavy. I mean, we've been up to 26,000 before with this trailer and this truck, and it handles it just fine. But the issue is that the engine makes a ton of boost, 25 plus pounds per square inch, or PSI, and that compressor outlet, again, that rubber boot, that blue silicone rubber boot, is having to hold about the same pressure as a car tire, which is anywhere from 25 to 35 PSI, typically. And so, oh, and by the way, it's extremely hot too, because when the compressor does its thing and it puts that much, generates that much boost, it's also putting a lot of heat into the air, which is why you need an intercooler in the first place. And so that combination of hot, high pressure air over weeks and months and years eventually weakens the silicone rubber in that boot, to where even with two heavy clamps holding it down, eventually it lets go and that charge air pipe goes blasting out the side of it, with a pretty good amount of force. And then, because you have lost the connection between the turbo and that charge air pipe, you lose all your boost. And a diesel engine, a modern diesel engine, cannot make any power without boost. When it's idling, that's one thing, and it can idle just fine, but without boost, it can't rev above, let's say, 1,000 RPM, because the engine is expecting a certain amount of air volume to be going into it, and so it releases a certain amount of fuel based on that fact. And when it doesn't have the air, it just gets all confused, and it can't compensate. And so as a result, you end up creeping along at about 2 miles an hour after this happens. And again, it had never happened to us, and it was a bit of a surprise, to say the least. But then we got on Facebook and started talking to other people, and it turns out it happens all the time. So I guess that's some consolation. The problem is, it never happened to us before. We've been driving for decades, been driving since the mid-1980s, and driving turbo diesels for more than 10 years. And so it turns out you need to have one of those clamps with you at all times. I'll show you what it looks like. Here's the old boot by way of comparison. And so these clamps are, you can't use a hose clamp. You have to use one of these high pressure clamps. and it uses a 7/16 self-locking nut. And if you can see, this is the OEM rubber boot. There's that GM part number on it, 151-88715. And this is the compressor side of it. This is the charge air pipe side of it. And you see it just kind of got worn out and it let go. And even with that clamp holding it, it wasn't enough to keep it from blowing off. By the way, there's one of these clamps on the compressor side when it's first assembled, and then there's a single-use clamp on the charge air pipe side. And when that clamp blows off, or when the charge air pipe blows off, you're not getting that clamp back on because it's been like crimped into place, and it doesn't have a nut or something that you can loosen and tighten. And so if the OEM blue rubber boot fails, unless you have a clamp to replace it with, you're stuck. And so we did not, and so we had to call. It only took about a half an hour, 45 minutes for a truck to show up, for a wrecker to show up with a new one. And so we got that OEM crimped clamp replaced. Again, it's got a 7/16 self-locking nut. You just use a deep well socket, or you use a like an open and closed end wrench, hopefully ratcheting to close it and tighten it up, and you're back on your way. The problem though, and this is why it happened to us twice, you saw that rubber had just gotten stretched out and it wasn't capable of sealing tightly even under the pressure of a clamp. And so the second time, again, we were going up a steep uphill section of Interstate 80 here, and it failed for a second time. Of course, going uphill at night in an area where there is a very, very tiny breakdown lane. And we had to limp it for about 2 or 3 miles to the next exit. Not the most pleasant experience. And then we got a replacement, and that was made by Gates, and we'll put the part number in the comments. And it's a little bit of an improvement. It's a better quality silicone rubber, and we'll see how long that one lasts. This one has lasted 375,000 miles. The original one did, and to be honest, that's not bad. You know, a truck gets this old. It's 11 years old, and it's got, again, 376,000 miles. And again, at that age, little stuff is going to start going wrong, and you know, you deal with it, you adapt, you figure it out, you fix it, you move on to the next thing. I would tell you, this truck has done very, very well for us. We've had it for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and it just hasn't given us a lot of trouble. It does the job. We've loaded it, not to the max GCWR, gross combined weight rating, but close to it. We've loaded it to almost exactly 26,000 pounds, and it actually does well with that much of a load. And that's about 8,500 for the truck, and about 17,500 for the trailer. And it was built, I think, with a max gross combined weight rating of 29,000, give or take. So it can handle just over a 20,000 pound trailer. And so we weren't at the limit by any stretch. But I tell you, Interstate 80, we've been doing this route back and forth on I-80 through Pennsylvania and Ohio probably a dozen or more times in the last few months. And you know, you hear about the so-called Ike Gauntlet on the Rocky Mountains, that the TFL truck guys use as their torture test for pickup trucks and heavy trailers. And to be honest, there's a lot of stretches of I-80 going through Pennsylvania that are an exceptionally good test of your rig. About the 50 or 60 mile stretch from about exit 90 or 100 to exit maybe 150 or 160, that has a lot of steep uphill, long steep uphill stretches on it. When you're coming west, I should say. And it's a very, very good test of your truck. If your truck fully loaded with the max trailer going the speed limit can make it through Interstate 80 headed west on Pennsylvania, then you've got nothing to worry about. And so again, we had never even heard of that little boot, that little rubber boot on the turbo before, and it was a case of discovery learning for us. Made about an 8.5, 9 hour trip into about a 10.5, 11 hour trip. But what's there to say? Lesson learned. Now you know. Word of the wise: carry a 7/16 deep socket ratchet with you, and a spare 2-inch clamp. Not a hose clamp, because a hose clamp will ruin the rubber. The little grooves on the inside of a hose clamp will ruin the grooves. Will ruin the rubber on that boot. And if you're really good, you might just carry a spare boot. The problem is, again, this thing, the original lasted 11 years and 375,000 miles, and you can't bring one of everything everywhere you go. So, regardless, we got through it. It was about 20 minutes to replace the boot once we got the new one in. And it was actually very hard to find. None of the auto parts stores had it. Amazon didn't have it. Had to order it from some website we'd never heard of before. And we got the last one they had. And this will happen to anything with an LML eventually, meaning a 2011 to 2016 Duramax. And that part is made for, I think, everything as far back as the LB7. So the original Duramax from whenever it came out, 01, 02 timeframe. So any Duramax, going back to the beginning and through the final year of the LML, which is 2016, might have this happen. And as far as I understand it, the L5P, the newest Duramax, which came out in 2017, has not had this issue. Because I guess GM eventually, heard from enough owners and fixed that rubber boot and put a stronger one on when they made the L5P. A couple other things to pass along. Again, if you haven't driven through Pennsylvania during the summer, it's exceptionally pretty. You wouldn't want to do it in the winter. When it snows, it completely shuts down the interstate for days at a time, and it's just kind of treacherous. You don't want to make that trip if you don't absolutely have to, even in the rain, because some of these long downhill stretches, you just don't want to have your brakes lock up going down them. By the way, you also, if you're in a truck and trailer, you must have a truck with a diesel exhaust brake on it. If you don't, then you're taking your life into your hands. It's that striking of a difference, driving a truck with one and a truck without one. And again, having your brakes fail on a 3-mile downhill stretch with a fully loaded trailer that ends in a sharp turn and a steep ravine, it's just not how you want to go out. Having your brakes melt on you, or having your trailer brakes lock up on you and bring that trailer around and jackknife and put you off the road. It's not how you want to go out. So get a truck that has a diesel exhaust brake. For some reason known only to God, the big three do not put a diesel exhaust brake on their diesel-powered 1500 series trucks. And it makes no damn sense in the world. But fortunately, they started putting exhaust brakes on their heavy-duty pickups, meaning the 2500s and 3500s, about a decade or a decade and a half ago. And they work great. And again, they save your damn life because they keep you from having to ride the brakes going all the way down the side of a mountain. One or two other things to pass along. I'm sorry about the glare from all that sunlight. But the Allison transmission in this truck, the 6-speed Allison 1000, it's one of the, I'm going to say it's one of the 2 or 3 greatest transmissions put into a heavy-duty pickup. Obviously, a lot of people love the G56 manual in the Ram, but that went away after 2018 when they redid the when they redesigned it because nobody was buying it, unfortunately. The ASIN that comes in the Ram, the high output Ram, the ASIN 6-speed is probably the most beloved automatic transmission in a heavy duty pickup. And then I'll tell you, the Allison 6-speed, which is in this truck, which they finally got rid of around 2019 or maybe 2020 timeframe. This is just a spectacular transmission. The one in this exact vehicle, it's got 375,000 miles on it. Never been replaced, never been rebuilt, never had major work done on it other than fluid and filter changes. And it just runs like a champ all day and night for years and years and hundreds of thousands of miles. I'm not sure exactly when it goes out, when they typically go out, but I know the ASIN lasts for about, somebody said about 550,000 miles. That's when you have to rebuild it. And I don't know about the 6-speed Allison, but I'll tell you again, from living with one for a couple of years, it's a phenomenal transmission. The only thing you got to keep in mind about it is that you can't put too much power through it. In fact, it's generally not, I really don't see any reason to chip or to tune or to delete or really do anything with this engine and transmission because they work so well together. You know, 397 horsepower should be enough for most people. 765 pound-feet of torque should be enough for most people. Now, every now and then, going up a steep uphill with a loaded, fully loaded trailer, yeah, we felt a slight loss of power. And every now and then we thought, God, you know, maybe another 50 horsepower wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But to be honest, it's a great engine. It's got great power delivery. It's a great shifting transmission. And unfortunately, if you do start adding too much power to this engine, it's going to kill the transmission. I think who said it? Gale Banks said that the Allison 6-speed in this truck can handle about 500, maybe 600 horsepower, and that's the most you ever want to put through it. If it starts slipping, it's going to immediately go into limp mode, and a lot of extra power is going to make it start slipping. The other thing is that the engine in general, if you start hot dogging it and you start going up these hills a little too fast, you're going to see your engine temps rise. You're going to see your transmission go up to around 175, 180 degrees. Unfortunately, there's no way of knowing the EGTs because there's no exhaust gas temp gauge, and there's also no boost gauge, so you just kind of have to assume it's within the limits. But it'll let you know if it's over the limits because it'll put you in limp mode. And it's happened to us once or twice, and it's sudden and it's dramatic. You don't just lose a little bit of power, you lose like 95% of your power. And both times it's happened to us, we've had the 48-foot trailer hitched up as we do now, and we were either in heavy traffic or going up a steep uphill grade, and it just said power is reduced. And yeah, it loses 90 to 95% of its power. It would be nice if it kind of slowly eased it off, but no, I guess it just decides you're running it too hard, and so you're going to get no power. One or two more things about the transmission. We would really like it if it would have had what the Ford has, the 10-speed Ford, where you hit the plus or minus buttons, you're in drive. You're not in manual mode, you're just in drive, and you hit the plus or minus buttons. It would be nice if it would lock out top gear, or maybe the top 2 gears, because you don't always want to put it in manual mode and take over all the shifting. Maybe you just want to lock out 6th gear for a while because you're going up a series of hills, and you just rather have it top off in 5th gear for a while, or maybe 4th gear. And the Ford 10-speed in the F-150 is brilliant in this regard, because it lets you do that. It's, you don't have to put it into manual mode. You just lock out 10th gear, and it becomes a 9-speed automatic. And this transmission doesn't let you do that. I'm not sure about the new 10-speed in the 2020, or again whenever it switched over to 10-speed, whether that has that feature. But this one, the 6-speed, definitely does not. And then I guess the other thing we wish for as well is that every now and then you're going about 55 or 60 on an uphill, fully loaded with a heavy trailer, and you're starting to lug the engine. You're starting to lug the engine in 5th gear, and it's down to 1700 RPMs, 1600 RPMs, and it downshifts from 5th down to 4th, and it's kind of violent because it goes from 1700 RPMs all the way up to about 2400, and that's almost too fast. And it would almost be nice, I've said it before, it'd almost be nice if it had a gear in between 4th and 5th, or if they just tighten the spread on the ratios there. It's not a matter of the final drive being too tall, because it's got a 373 final drive, so that's not the issue. It's just that the ratio spread between 4th and 5th is a little bit too much. Going uphill on this thing, the sweet spot is around 2000 to 2200 RPMs, and if you're going uphill, it's somewhere around 55 to 60. 4th gear is going to be too short because it's going to be revving the hell out of the engine, and 5th gear is going to be too tall. And so we've had that happen a couple times, and it's just a little bit annoying. That's not an issue between 5th and 6th, because it's a nice tight spread between those 2 gears. But it would almost be nice if they made 5th maybe a little bit shorter, so it was closer in terms of the spread to 4th gear than it is to 6th gear, because there's very, very little gap between 5th and 6th in terms of the ratio. One or two other things. We're kind of torn because, the truck is 11 years old and it's got a lot of miles. And at some point we do want to upgrade it, because, we've hit one limit or another with this thing. Probably wouldn't want to take it through the Rockies fully loaded with 26,000 pounds combined on all 3 axles. Meaning the steer, the drive, and the trailers. Because again, it's got a lot of power, but you do start to lose a little bit at high altitudes. Not because the engine can't make the boost it needs to, but because the intercooler isn't getting enough airflow, because the air is so thin, and so the intercooler can't function properly to take heat out of the charged air and make it denser, so you can get more of it into the combustion chambers. And so you do see a little bit of a loss of power even with a turbocharged engine at high altitudes. And so it might not be the absolute best thing to take through the Rockies, 11,000 feet through the Vail Pass or the Eisenhower Pass. But it's a hell of a lot better of a truck to take out west than our 03 Cummins, because that truck struggles even with about an 8,000 pound trailer to get through the mountains. The transmission, which is a 47 RE, just can't handle it. on the uphill, and there's no exhaust brake, and so you're cooking the brakes going downhill. And we've towed this trailer through the the Arizona Rockies on I-40 and I-10, I guess, with the 03 5.9 Cummins, and it's just not a pleasant experience. This truck would be a much more suitable truck to take through those mountains, but at the same time, again, it is getting old, and you don't want to have little stuff breaking when you're in the middle of the Rockies, and it's February. I'll tell you, the two F-150s we just bought, the Power Stroke Diesel 3.0 and the Power Boost with a 3.5 and a hybrid system. Those are phenomenal trucks, and they're the first two new vehicles we've ever bought. And the confidence you get knowing that you got a brand new vehicle with a factory warranty that's just not going to break anytime soon, at least, that's nice. Especially when you got family with you. You don't want to be breaking down with family in the vehicle with you. But again, overall, we can't complain because we did pay less than $20,000 for this thing, and it's got almost everything you need. It's a dually, it's a four-wheel drive, it's got the independent front end, which we prefer because it steers a lot tighter than a straight axle truck. It's got a crew cab, it's got the nicer interior, it's got the LTZ trim level, which is a lot nicer of an interior than the LT or the work truck. It's 11 years old, but it still looks fine. It doesn't have a 12-inch touchscreen, but you can actually live without that. And so I think for the time being, we're just going to live with this thing and have little stuff go wrong and either figure out how to fix it or take it to someone who can fix it before we come out of our pocket for another $60,000 brand new truck. And we're actually waiting for someone to come out with something like the F-150's Pro Power on board in a heavy duty. We're also waiting for someone to come out with the F-150's, something similar to the F-150's self-driving system in a heavy duty. Essentially a lane keeping / lane centering system. And when they do that, we will upgrade in a heartbeat. But until then, we'll just keep living with this 2011 Duramax. That's been running very well for us. Very, very well for us. All right, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and the rest of your summer, which is coming to an end very soon. Talk to you later.